The local share market hits a 3-month low on global recession fears. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese signs a $1 billion export deal with Germany. And online bookmaker Sportsbet spends $64 million in advertising in just 18 months. It's Tuesday, the 11th of July, 2023. Welcome to Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, after the show, you've got an interview coming up with Julian Broadbent, founder and CEO of Applied EV.
Now, this is an interview where I learn plenty. In fact, it's an area which I didn't know much about. It's about electric vehicles, but from the vehicle manufacturer's perspective. So Julian has a long history with vehicle manufacturers, including General Motors in Detroit, and he kind of brings that expertise to the technology side of it. So you put the manufacturing, the technology together, and they're trying to come up with autonomous vehicles. It is a fascinating chat. I just didn't realize how hard a challenge that is. And Julian takes us through that process in a way that I can understand it. So I definitely recommend this interview.
Yeah, it is a really good listen. It is coming up a little bit later on. The main story this morning, though, Sean, is certainly a big one. The Australian share market has fallen to its lowest level in more than 3 months as fears of deflation in China, a recession in the US, and a recession locally all combine to drag on equities.
Yes, there have been a number of very weak sessions in recent days, with most sectors falling lower. Yesterday, the S&P ASX 200 closed down 1.5% to just over 7,000 points. It fell 1.7% on Friday. The market is down nearly 7% since its high early in the year. The immediate catalyst yesterday was Chinese inflation figures. Consumer price index data released show that China has almost no inflation. That's not good. Every economy needs inflation. In fact, there are fears that deflation is emerging in the world's second largest economy. That would be a disaster. When there's deflation, Michael, in fact, I'm going to ask you, if you thought something was cheaper in 3 months' time than now, what would you do?
Well, I'm certainly not going to buy it today, Sean.
Exactly. That's why deflation is a disaster. People stop spending, and that's how you really send an economy into a spiral. So that's the fear about what's going on in China. That obviously hurts our big iron and ore miners and all sorts of companies. There's also fears of a recession in the US and here in Australia. The central banks of both economies have made it clear that there are further interest rate rises in the offing because inflation remains too high and wage pressures abound. AMP Chief Economist Shane Oliver reckons there's at least a 50% chance of Australia going into a recession. He reckons household spending will go backwards as the full impact of interest rates hit. That is bad news for people investing in equities.
Yeah, sure is. So which stocks are being hit hardest?
Well, I mean, I mentioned the iron ore miners. They are really struggling at the moment, particularly on the back of those Chinese inflation figures. Yesterday, BHP and Rio were down 1%. Fortescue Metals Group was off more than 2%. The banks aren't having a great time of it either. Commonwealth Bank of Australia is back below $100 a share. National Australia Bank has been one of the worst performing large caps over the past year. The tech stocks have bumped around a bit, but yesterday they actually performed pretty well. WiseTech Global, Xero and REA all ended in the black. One sector that has done pretty well is gold. Now, it's a safe haven in tough times, and gold stocks are benefiting. Newcrest Mining finished up 1% yesterday. Northern Star Resources was almost 2% higher. The energy stocks have also done okay in recent sessions. But really, the overwhelming sentiment in the share market is negative, and there's just doesn't look to be a catalyst in the short term to change that.
Now, Sean, you and I were chatting a little bit about this yesterday afternoon, just on the phone, and you mentioned that you're actually in Orange in the central west of New South Wales at the moment. And we'll put a little video up on our Instagram account, the Fear and Greed podcast. I have never seen a person look as cold as you do in this video.
Yeah, there was a breeze blowing. So I think it was probably 5 or 6 degrees, but there was a breeze blowing. So the chill factor was big.
You just look a little bit sad.
And I had beanie on and everything. There you
I
go.
know. And you got the rosy red cheeks. Kind of cute. What's happening in international markets, Sean?
Oil prices have steadied after last fortnight recording the first back-to-back weekly gain since May. Saudi Arabia and Russia have again pledged to tighten supply. Still, oil is 9% below where it was at the beginning of the year. And once again, mostly about China's lackluster performance and outlook. And Michael, the Aussie dollar is trading around 66.5 US cents.
All right, we'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, Anthony Albanese has signed a $1 billion defence export deal with Germany, the first of several announcements, according to the Prime Minister.
Albanese met with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz yesterday after arriving in Germany ahead of the NATO summit in Lithuania. Albanese said the new defence export deal was a great outcome for Australia as it would create jobs and boost the economy. The deal includes Australia delivering more than 100 Boxer-armed carriers to Germany. Albanese said it's one of Australia's largest ever exports and will both boost our defence capability as well as the economy. Building a relationship with Germany also has potential benefits for the local hydrogen industry. Germany has been leading the way in terms of manufacturing going greener. The country's interested in Australia's green hydrogen supplies to help with an energy deficit brought about by the war in Ukraine. Also, Germany would be a powerful ally as Canberra tries to get that European Union Australia free trade deal off the ground.
Now, Sean, dividends are an important part of an investment decision, particularly for many older Australians. And the resources stocks, which until recent years weren't the biggest dividend payers, are now leading the way.
Yes, that's right. So soaring commodity prices in recent years have triggered a bunch of special dividends. Rio, BHP have paid special dividends and relatively high interim and full year dividends by the resource companies. Now, so while banks and Telstra are thought of as the big dividend players, it just really hasn't been true. It certainly wasn't last year.
May I ask you a very quick question? Special dividends. Typically, kind of what triggers that?
When you have windfall profits. So BHP paid a special dividend when iron ore prices went through the roof. They went up to about, I think it was $140 a tonne, way above what normal prices are. And so BHP found itself with lots of cash. What's it do? It provides a special dividend to shareholders. They're one-off dividends. So interim and full year dividends are regular dividend payments, but special dividends are one-offs.
And so it happens outside of that normal cycle.
Well, it actually happens at the half. Well, it almost always happens at the half year or full year. That's when they're announced, but they're not part of the normal cycle.
Can you actually hear me learning right now, Sean? It actually makes quite a distinct noise. It's just this grinding noise in my head as the gears are slowly turning. I'm taking it in. I'm taking it all in. Please go on.
So Woodside last year led the way with its dividend yield, which refers to the full year dividend divided by the share price, at 10.9%. That's according to a story in The Australian. Fortescue Metals was next at 9%, just above BHP. Harvey Norman was pretty good at 8.7%. Then South 32, Perpetual and Tabcorp Holdings. ANZ was the best of the banks, though, yielding 6.6%. Still a very strong yield, right? Getting 6.6% return is pretty good, but nothing like the resource stocks last year at least.
All right. Now, Sean, Meta, owner of Facebook and Instagram, WhatsApp, and now Threads, of course, will provide a one-off funding increase to its news offering in an attempt to crack down on misinformation in the lead up to the voice referendum over whether to introduce an Indigenous voice to Parliament.
Yeah, so remember the company was heavily criticised for allowing misinformation during the 2016 presidential election in the US. That's the one where Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton. The group has now put in place a process for addressing controversial public events, and its public policy boss, Mia Garlick, said that that process will be used for the referendum, which is going to be later this year. Meta will give an undisclosed amount to a bunch of media outlets, including Australian Associated Press and RMIT's Fact Lab, to boost their fact-checking programs, which identify false articles. Meta will warn users about sharing links to those articles, limit how many people see links from those who ignore the warnings, and add a disclaimer to readers.
Pressure is mounting on former Prime Minister Scott Morrison as the fallout from the illegal robo-debt scheme grows.
Yes, so current Prime Minister Anthony Albanese says it's a decision for Scott Morrison about what he wants to do, but his own party aren't exactly rushing to support him. Coalition MPs are reportedly saying it's up to him rather than giving him support. That's all about whether he should stay after the Royal Commission blasted his behaviour in relation to the robo-debt scheme. Outspoken Tasmanian Liberal MP Bridget Archer said it's difficult for the party to move on, particularly after Morrison issued a statement rejecting all the adverse findings against him. Nationals MP and former Deputy Prime Minister Barnaby Joyce took a very different line. He said he's apologetic for the suicides that occurred after vulnerable people received Centrelink debt notices generated from the scheme. He said that Morrison needs to make his own decision. Basically, there ain't a lot of support for Scott Morrison. In fact, even the Cronulla Sharks rugby league team is considering revoking Morrison's number one ticket holder status, particularly if he's found guilty of negligence or wrongdoing over their robo-debt program.
Yeah, it's a big story and an evolving one too. Now, Ardent Leisure's share price, Sean, jumped 13% yesterday after providing a positive financial year update.
This group, which owns Dreamworld, Whitewater World and Skypoint Observation Deck, has had a shocking run, COVID primarily, but also accidents at Dreamworld. Anyway, it came out yesterday and said unaudited revenue was up $70 million last financial year. Basically, it's all about higher ticket sales. The group said the slowdown in consumer spending had been overdone. It's doing okay. I don't know, it's just a good news story for Ardent Leisure. Good on them.
Yeah, it certainly is. Sportsbet, the country's largest online bookmaker, has spent $64 million on television ads during live sport and racing events in just the past 18 months, Sean. That's more than triple the amount spent by rivals Tabcorp and Ladbrokes.
Yes, fairly incredible. Confidential spending data compiled by researchers at Nielsen and obtained by the Australian Financial Review shows the extent of spending by bookmakers just as the federal government considers whether to place a ban on gambling advertising on television. That proposal, the ban, comes from a parliamentary inquiry. It's worried major broadcasters who fear that they'll lose revenue. Already, bookmakers are scaling back their spending. Most of Sportsbet's ads run in the AFL and NRL seasons as the wagering company is the official partner for both codes. Data from March to September, when both competitions run, show more than $32 million was spent in that 6-month period alone, double that for the 18-month period. Entain-owned Ladbrokes and Ned's brands spent a combined $38 million from January last year to May. Ladbrokes itself was $20 million, about a third of what Sportsbet spent. Nielsen's data does not account for in-house stadium advertisements or sponsorships on jerseys. They'd also be banned under a government recommendation. So plenty of money being spent and plenty of companies worried about what's going to happen.
Yeah, big numbers in that story. And there's big numbers in this one as well, Sean. New research reveals for the first time that greenhouse gases from the plastics Australians consume each year is equivalent to pollution from 5.7 million cars or 16 million tonnes. And if nothing happens, that will double by 2050.
A new report by the Australian Marine Conservation Society and World Wildlife Fund Australia, reported in the Sydney Morning Herald and Age, calculates for the first time the volume of emissions generated in the production of the plastic products Australians use annually. It found that runaway plastic use is a significant contributor to climate change, as well as killing millions of animals that swallow or get tangled in plastic pollution. Australia produces 13% of the plastic it consumes, but it imports the remaining 87%. Australians are heavy plastic users, generating more single-use plastic waste per person than any other country except Singapore. And the report argues that Australia has an obligation to consider the greenhouse impacts of all the plastics we import, consume and dispose of.
And along the same line, Sean, the Great Barrier Reef is heading into the red zone for risk of coral bleaching, which would be the fifth such event in less than 10 years.
Yes, scientists warned that high sea surface temperatures driven by an El Nino weather system coupled with the ongoing effects of global warming make mass mortality on the reef increasingly likely. Bleaching last year was particularly alarming given it was the first occurrence during a La Nina phase, which is typically a cooler period than average. The World Meteorological Organization last week declared an El Nino, upping the risk of another mass coral bleaching this year. There have been 5 mass bleaching events: 2002, And then 2016, 2017, 2020, and 2022, all very recently. Scientists say global warming is the major factor driving the greater frequency, with average atmospheric temperatures already up by more than 1 degree. And finally, Michael, Bill Evans, after 30 years as Westpac's chief economist, is stepping down. He's being replaced by Reserve Bank Assistant Governor Lucy Ellis. Good luck to Bill after many years at the top of his game. The fact that the Assistant Governor responsible for economics at the Reserve Bank has just resigned, and that the new governor, unlikely to be Phil Lowe, will be announced in coming days, means there's going to be a new look team running the economy. Michael?
Yeah, some big changes coming. All right, international news now, Sean, and Ukraine's effort to join NATO have been, or at least are being, thwarted, with both Germany and the US against any immediate moves.
Yes, there's been a big push for certainly from within Ukraine to join NATO. Hungary is also opposed to it. Other European countries are worried that urgent Ukraine membership agreed at this week's NATO summit in Lithuania would then immediately drag the European continent into the Russian war. The idea, of course, being if you're a member of NATO, other members of NATO would support you if you're attacked. And that's really why countries like Germany, Hungary, and the US are worried about Ukraine joining NATO.
And US President Joe Biden visited Windsor Castle for tea with King Charles III yesterday, and top of the agenda was climate change.
Would it be a cracking conversation, Joe Biden and Charlie?
It would. I'm just more interested in I know I should be interested in what they're talking about, but I'm more intrigued about what they ate.
Oh, really? Why is that?
It feels so formal. I imagine they're eating melting moments.
So I must say, my friend Sean Turnell, who we have spoken about before, he was the gentleman who was held in Burma for a number of months. In fact, I think it was 14 or 15 months and released earlier this year. He visited King Charles III. We put that up on our Instagram account, his photo of him and King Charles III. And he said he was a very down-to-earth individual. And he said the whole sort of the tea and scones thing, nah. He said he just had a chat. He's just a very nice fella. There you go.
Oh, that is actually interesting. And I imagine it would be quite an engaging conversation. But I would also just like to know what they do serve. I'm just intrigued. Maybe pikelets.
With jam?
Oh, yeah.
Probably.
A bit of jam, bit of butter, bit of jam. Away you go. That's down to earth.
Well, certainly President Biden's visit included a royal salute and a viewing of US-related artefacts. Biden and the King will also host a forum that will focus on how to encourage private companies to engage in more clean energy efforts, specifically in developing economies. Biden didn't attend the coronation back in May. Jill Biden, First Lady, she attended though. He last had formal talks with Charles, who was then Prince of Wales, in November 2021 at the COP26 United Nations Climate Summit in Glasgow. They certainly have that in common, their belief in the need to do something about climate change. Biden also attended the state funeral for the late Queen Elizabeth II before he visited Windsor Castle. He met with British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak.
All right, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily interview. Today, Sean, you're speaking with Julian Broadbent, founder and CEO of Applied EV. And he's got a fairly impressive kind of pedigree when it comes to working in automotive manufacturing, because he was previously at General Motors.
Sure was. He was in Detroit and in Melbourne. We have a chat about, I suppose, it's the challenge of creating autonomous driving vehicles and just how hard it is. I think at one point there he compares it to space exploration, and he says this is even harder than that. Fascinating chat.
Yeah, it's coming up next in the Fear and Greed playlist or at fearandgreed.com.au. Sean, very quickly, we have a Mia today, a most enthusiastic advocate. Today, it is a listener by the name of Mel who wrote to us. She has just returned from an overseas holiday. And do you know what she was doing while she was traveling around Europe?
What was she doing?
Listening to Fear and Greed.
Oh, Mel. Good on you.
Listening to interviews while on a little island off Dubrovnik.
Oh, wow. In Croatia.
Fear and Greed has gone international. And then kind of carried on around the rest of Europe and wanted you to know one thing, Sean, after yesterday's show where we were talking about your footwear for your upcoming international travel.
Yep.
She said, please tell Sean every second person in Italy was wearing Birkenstocks.
Oh,
he
really?
will be very on trend.
Oh, Mel, you have made my day. Thank you very much. And Mel, if you happen to run into my son Charlie, I apologise. Charlie, 21-year-old Charlie's with a bunch of his friends traveling Europe.
Sounds high risk indeed. All right, there we go. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thanks, Michael.
It's Tuesday, the 11th of July, 2023. Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Threads, and check out the video of a very cold Sean Aylmer on Instagram as well. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.